And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
All right, thank you for joining us for aviation weather. And for tomorrow morning, we've got IFR here, Seward Peninsula, bearing straight right on down the southwest coast into the eastern Aleutians here and along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Some more IFR here over the southern Bering Sea, extending down into the central and western Aleutians. IFR here up the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range with marginal VFR around the Alaska Range and then dropping down over the Talkeetnas, and some IFR developing over western Prince William Sound. But from about Yakutat or so on down the southeast coast stays VFR, as well as a good portion of the interior and the north slope to the eastern Arctic coast. For the afternoon, most of the central and east side of the state looking really good with lower conditions to the west here. As you can see, marginal VFR from the western Arctic coast all the way down into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, with some IFR sliding farther to the north along the western Alaska Range, and also from western Prince William Sound along the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, eastern Kodiak Island area, IFR as well. No change for the southeast coast, possibly some marginal VFR here slipping up from Dixon entrance into the southern areas, but for the most part, not much change down that way. And out west, IFR, central southern Bering Sea, still down in toward the central Aleutians here and toward Chimionat And then for the morning hours on Thursday, IFR right over the central Bering Sea, southward there, across, well, from the Pribilofs right on down into Unimak Island with marginal VFR for the remainder of the Aleutian chain into the western interior here, and now eastward along the Kobuk Valley into the northern two-thirds of the Koyukuk Valley into the Brooks Range, but north of the mountains there, VFR for the central and eastern North Slope and Arctic coast. IFR still on the western slopes of the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, and IFR just east of Fognak Island, right up to the southern Kenai Peninsula into southwestern Prince William Sound. And over the southern southeast coast now, some lower conditions finding their way in, looking IFR there for the southern panhandle, staying VFR to the north. And then for Thursday afternoon, IFR mostly along and off the coast now, the panhandle, some marginal VFR into the inside waters, VFR over the eastern interior here, Copper River Basin, Tanana Valley, right on up to the eastern Arctic coast, with some marginal VFR possible there, eastern Brooks Range. Definitely marginal conditions here for the central and western part of the state, and IFR right along the Yukon Delta coast down to about Nunivak Island, maybe the Pribilofs over the northern Bering Sea, and another batch there pushing into the west central Aleutians. Passes for Anaktuvuk and Adigan tomorrow, both looking on the marginal side. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR, especially on the eastern entrances, rainy IFR, lowest conditions on the east side. And for windy, marginal VFR. Isabel, though, VFR, stays VFR from Mentasta. Tanita, marginal VFR. Portage, IFR. And Chilkoot and White, another VFR day coming up once again. And for the freezing levels here, warm air aloft, upper high pressure, 14,000 foot freezing levels there for the southeast coast, and 12,000 here right across southern Alaska, sloping down to about 6,000 feet there up over the north central interior just south of the Brooks Range, and then 4,000 feet just along the western Arctic coast, and some cooler air extending southward here over the Bering Sea with the trough 4,000 to 6,000 feet over the central Aleutians. And moving on to the icing, look for considerable moderate rime icing here, sliding into the interior along the Yukon River southwestward there to a narrow band out toward Nunivak Island, and another batch here showing up just south of the western Aleutians with the next system. And from there, looking at the jet stream, upper level low here well southwest of the Queen Charlotte Islands. Otherwise, we've got good south to north flow here. 95 taking a turn to the northeast there at about 110 knots there along the eastern Arctic coast and north slope. That in advance of a trough axis out here over the Bering Sea, and then westerlies mostly south of the Aleutian chain. And at 9,000 feet, low pressure roughly in about this position here south of Nunivak Island, In advance of that, south wind 60 knots, pretty good winds here for the Aleutian Range up into the southwest interior, and even 55 knots out of the southwest over the west central interior, then down to 40 knots for the eastern Arctic coast and eastern Brooks Range under good high pressure. Winds stay light and variable for the Panhandle. And 3,000 feet, light variable winds here for the Gulf of Alaska into the Panhandle over the eastern interior. And then this low coming northward here, bringing a good shot of southerly winds up to 55 knots there across northeast Bristol Bay and the Aleutian Range, 45 knots up along the Kuskokwim Valley area. And then northerlies on the back side of that, possibly 30 to 40 knots there, mostly across Unalaska Island, just clipping the Pribilofs. Southwesterlies, 25 to 30 knots there for the western Arctic coast. And then the stronger winds with this next system, but that's staying south of the western Aleutians. Turbulence-wise, could be some considerable moderate turbulence from about Point Ley down to Cape Lisburne and Point Hope there. And also a bigger area of likely considerable moderate turbulence here along the western Alaska Range, southern Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, all the way out to the eastern Aleutians, and covering much of the southwest interior right up into the Kuskokwim Valley as well as the Kuskokwim Mountains, and not much else across the remainder of the east side, smooth over the southeast coast.